Hey, lovely. Well, thank you for being here today, Sean. Taking time out of your busy schedule. Um, we've received loads of questions from our St. Matthew's Project parents, and the community at St. Matthew's Project in celebration of Neurodiversity Week. So I thought it would be a great idea to invite an expert like yourself to answer a couple of questions. Sean, he has experience working with mental health. He's a mental health advocate, has experience working with neurodivergent individuals, and he also has lived experiences. So, Sean, could you tell me a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So, yes, I'm Sean Flores. I'm a mental health advocate, full-time TEDx speaker, and I speak quite often about, in particular, OCD, which is often quite a deeply misunderstood mental illness. They've suspected I've had ADHD since the year 2000, but that was when my father passed away on Christmas Day when I was 6. And as I got older, I started to experience a lot of different diversity in the way that my brain processed and my brain conceptualized the world. But as I got even older, so a lot of those mental health challenges that you typically do have as a result of mental neurodiversity started to really rear its head. I've worked in the NHS. I work currently as a peer support worker. Before that, I was a trainee children's wellbeing practitioner, so I was working with children that had anxiety, kids with low mood, kids that had behavioral difficulties. Those are some of the kids that I was working with. I speak very often in schools. I do a lot of workshops. So I'm someone that tries to use my lived experience and also the professional side of things to really help get people to understand that neurodiversity is not new. It's old. It's always been around. It's just now we've been able to find the literature or the scientific language in which we can explain certain different ways that people think or different ways people process the world.
And it's great because we're gaining more understanding. So our parents have given us a couple questions. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, how can I help my child build confidence and self-advocacy?
That's a great question. How can I help my child build confidence and self-advocacy? So one of the things I first of all would say is become an expert in your own experience and encourage your child to become as emotionally literate as they possibly can be. So, for example, when they tell you how they feel, ask them a lot more about how they feel. Like, what is it that's going on? Is it something you've been feeling for the last 10 minutes? Is it something you felt for an hour? Is it something that you felt before? And typically, when you felt this before, is there a reason maybe that you haven't told me? Is there a reason why you have told me? Or how can I help you? And what you do is you encourage your child to have the language to articulate their own experience. And in turn, that builds confidence for children to navigate what's going on in their heads. Because quite often, children absorb the language of adults around them. It's just part of the process of being human. As humans, we are incredibly a permeable species. Things go straight through us. And we are part of this wider network of people around us. So that's the first thing I would say, to definitely ask them about what's going on within their experience. Another way to really build a child's confidence is something which I call rejection therapy. It's a therapeutic
Mm.
modality, but it massively transformed me from being very shy and very introverted. So originally I was the kind of child who used to shy away from any sort of public spotlight, or I just didn't really want to do anything. I was shy, I was quite skinny, I
Mm.
stuttered quite a lot as well. So I deliberately started to do things that were a bit absurd and out there. And it was a way for me to work through social rejection. And social rejection is a really important thing in society, in the sense of we evolutionarily have been in many ways raised to fear social rejection, because once upon a time ago, if we were to be rejected by the tribe, it meant we lost access to resources and we potentially would have died. Now, the brain hasn't caught up in the same sense. The brain is still in many ways back in the Stone Ages. So it's started doing things, as I said, that were absurd. And I'd go and ask for tie a red balloon behind you as you're walking so people can follow you or people can see you. So it's putting the attention and spotlight on you and realizing that people's are always going to have opinions of you and it shouldn't necessarily matter. So that was one of the ways that I built confidence. And I still do it regularly to this day, but it's no longer rejection therapy because I got to a point where I actually started getting discounts, like for example, Lego and some of my
Ah,
favorite perfume. That's another way I built confidence.
Yeah.
But I also did things that were challenging, and I encourage every single parent to do this. I know quite often with parents, you want to raise your children and do what's best for them, and you don't want to hurt them or harm them. But children are not fragile creatures. Children are anti-fragile. And one of the best ways you can
Mm,
really get children to do that is getting them to do things they don't like, asking them, helping them to figure out what lessons they've been able to learn and to take away. And if I give you another
mhm,
example, I did Pathfinders when I was younger, which is almost like a Christian Scouts. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand the religious angle of it at all. But really and truly, it actually taught me so much. And in many ways, it gave me a lot of discipline, it gave me a lot of
mm,
values, and it really allowed me every single week to know that I could turn up to something I didn't like, but I could also find a good out of it. So it's encouraging your children to do things they don't like and encouraging them to do things that are difficult and helping them to find it, figure it out, but also encouraging them to find it out on their own as well. Those things really
mm,
build confidence. And I often say that confidence is building an undeniable stack of evidence that you are who you say you are. That's what you want to be able
mm.
to give to your child, that they are who they say they are and they believe in themselves fully and they can back themselves up.
Right, thank you so much. Another question we have from a parent is, what activities can help a child with low self-confidence? I know you touched on that earlier, but specifically for that question, what would you advise?
What activities can really help a
Hmm.
child with low confidence? Oh, I think the first question actually is it might be important to understand causing the child to have low confidence. I
Mm,
think rather than putting the activities first, have a conversation with them, asking them, is it they're comparing themselves? Are
hmm.
they on social media a lot? So, for example, if you're talking about activities for a child of low confidence, sometimes you have to remove activities in their lives, such as
Mm,
social media. Because, for example, we know social media once upon a time ago was correlated with poor mental health and anxiety and depression. But now we know social media is one of the biggest causes of poor mental health, anxiety, depression, and body image, especially in young women. So sometimes you may have to ask them what's going on. If it's they're looking at their friends on social media and their friends have got all the latest stuff, removing those activities actually can help them to feel to give them a more realistic idea of the world because we know social media is inherently a highlight reel. So that's one of the
hmm.
things I would say. The second thing I would say is doing things that are challenging in a gradual way, as I said, building up that confidence as time goes on. So I'd say cooking, for example, could be a great way to do
Mm,
things together. It can be semi-independent, cook with them. It's just a good way for them to build their skills. You could also get them
yeah.
to go to the park and talk to other kids, building their social skills. Because what happens sometimes is when we have low confidence or low self-esteem, we actually are always thinking other people are judging us. And to some degree, people are judging us, and to some other degree, people aren't. But what you're teaching a kid is they can go out and make friends and they can go out and be part of different environments and it still is okay regardless what's happening. So
Hmm.
sometimes you, as I said, you have to remove activities. Sometimes you add them. Adding them into team sports is something that's also really good as well. Teaching them to be part of this wider communion in some ways.
Hmm.
I know for some people, religion can really help them. So giving them a bedrock or a foundation upon some religious principles can really help some children to give them the belief in something bigger than them. I think even Lego is a great way. So I love Lego. I
Mm,
personally always did it with my child, and I do it quite a lot with my girlfriend. We build Lego. It's something that I think is massively helpful because again, you're building problem solving skills. You're building skills to be able to you can take out into the real world. So there's a few different activities you can do. Painting, cooking, as I
mm,
said, working out, exercise, team sports,
mm,
even some individual sports, actually. So, athletics is a great way for kids. Swimming, to this day, I still can't swim, so I need to learn how to swim. But those are different ways that you can help a child to have confidence for sure. And you can do this all within the comfort of your own home. You could even
mm,
maybe watch a documentary, and at the end of the documentary, you do a quiz to see how much they've remembered, but incentivize them in a realistic way and put rewards in there that are realistic. So let's say they get five, let's say out at the end of the documentary, they got 3 out of 5 questions right. Take them maybe for their favorite meal. So you're incentivizing them to know that their
mm.
good behavior is being rewarded. Those small things can really make a difference.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So the next set of questions are about friendships and social understanding. Another question we have from parents is, how can I help my child maintain friendships when others don't understand neurodivergence?
How can I help my child to maintain friendships when others don't understand neurodivergence? Very, very, very valid question. I think as the world has changed, as much as I do feel like things are catching up, it's a very, very good question in the sense of some people don't want to understand neurodiversity or simply don't want to believe in it. So I think there's two
Mm,
ways that you can approach this. And I often go with the first one, which is you can seek to have a conversation with them, not seek to win them over or to argue with them, but seek to understand where they're coming from and is there something in particular that's a barrier for to stop them from wanting to learn or to understand. So figuring that out is also really important.
mhm,
Or the second approach is you simply put your child around people who are only neuro affirming. And to some degree, I think that's good, but also to another degree, it's not realistic of the real world. The real world will have people
mm,
around them that aren't neuro affirming and people who aren't necessarily neuro inclusive. And I often say you can't change the world, but you can also help prepare your child for the world. So it's the idea, a famous proverb, which is prepare your child for the road and not the road for your child. Because if you prepare the road for your child, you teach them that in suffering, there's no good lessons to be learned. But if you teach them that they can handle the trials and the tribulations of life, you give them the skills and the tools to equip them to take on any
mm,
challenge in life. So I personally will always go with the first, being in different environments, some that are neuroaffirmative affirming and some that aren't neuroaffirming, just to give them that realistic picture
mm,
of life. Seek to understand why those individuals perhaps don't believe in neurodiversity. But as I said, don't seek to change their opinion. And we see this in psychology that if you try to force people to change their opinion, people are more likely to double down on their views already. And I found when you listen to learn, listen to understand, not listen to win, not listen to beat people, you actually can get to people a lot quicker. So I do understand that comes with a lot of emotional labor, emotional fortitude for sure. Because sometimes some people, no matter what you tell them, they're gonna just constantly not want to believe. But I would find that really does help people. And sometimes one of the things I found to be incredibly useful when working with parents, and even in my own experience talking to people, is telling people something in a third person perspective. So taking it out of the personalized self and putting it into someone else. Sometimes people are able to see things a little bit clearer when it comes to having those
mm,
conversations. And as a parent, I think one of the most important things you can do is speak about why it's so important for you to for your child to be recognized for their neurodiversity. You know, being very open, very vulnerable, setting that scene,
mm,
role modeling it for them, whether it's a child, whether it's a parent, that can massively really help to have certain conversations. But I think at the crux of it, allow your child to be in neuro-affirming and non-neuro-affirming environments as well. I think it's really important
mm,
because the real world is a cruel place. To live in many ways is to go through hardship inevitably every single day. Life is the hardest thing
mm.
you'll ever experience. And as I said, if your role and responsibility is to give your child the tools and the skills to raise them in the world without you, you're going to have to sometimes do things that feel a bit cruel to be kind.
So thank you for that. The next question we have, what strategies can parents use to support their child in social settings?
Was in social settings. First
Mm,
thing is to be affirming of what that's going on for them. And what I mean by that is if your child comes to you and says, Mom, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm really worried, I understand you, I hear you, and I really
mm,
appreciate you being brave enough to come and tell me about how you're feeling. I know that took a lot out, a lot from you, and I really want to make sure that you know that I've heard you. So that there
mm,
already for any parent that hears that, and even in an adult relationship, if you hear that, you know you're being listened to, right? And
mm,
it sets the scene. I think the second thing you can do is ask them what is it in particular they're struggling with? Is it the noises in the environment? Is there just so much going on? Is there a lot going on in their head? Are they struggling to process what's going on? So one of the things sometimes people do is they just give some people give their children ear defenders to help block out some of the sensory noise. Some people will take their child out for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, just give them time to regulate, time to calm themselves down, time to gives them time to adjust somewhat to where they are, and then to go back into that environment again. And if they need some time to come out, they can come out as time goes on. So you're giving them the chance to just, again, familiarize themselves to the environment and to desensitize themselves to the massive amounts of sensory overload that is going on. But another strategy I do know that people use sometimes quite often is, again, that exposure piece. It's the gradual building
Mm,
up for them to go to different environments that are uncontrollable in nature. For example, in a park on a Sunday when there could be
mm,
several kids screaming, and there could be football going on. There could be I don't know, a pub going. There could be a pub close. It could be anything. Having that as a constant way for them to adjust to their environment really helps. I know for some children that are neurodiverse, and I include autism in that, some children stim, so it's a way for them to help get through that. So they might have like a squishy toy. They might
mhm,
have a moment to just scream and shout just to get out whatever's going on in their system as a sensory overload. I think quite often children have their own ways of stimming, but it's important to be positively affirming to the ways that they do stim because quite often what we do see for children who are neurodiverse is that they're negatively reinforced when they do the behaviors that help them to regulate themselves in social settings, whereas they're
mm,
positively affirmed for doing neurotypical behaviors because that's seen doing the watchful waiting approach. So just watch them carefully, just take your time, help to understand them and help them to understand themselves is also a really good strategy as well. Because sometimes kids will find these answers out themselves, actually. They really will come to their own answers themselves. I know for some other parents as well, I know this does depend. So some strategies parents do incorporate is actually in regards to their diet. So some
mm,
parents actually deliberately will do a high fat, high protein, lower carbohydrate diet. In particular, it's been shown to really help for kids with autism and ADHD because
mm,
carbohydrates give you a lot of energy, whereas if you're using your protein and fat sources, it's a lot more of a clean source of energy, from what I understand. I'm not a nutritionist, or a dietitian, just to put it
disclaimer.
out there. So everything I am saying, please go away and do your own research. But I do know that can really help kids. A lower carbohydrate
Mm,
diet, so cutting out a lot of refined sugars, introducing a lot more of whole foods is actually going to be really important as well. Trying to
mm,
make sure they're having that as well. I know for some parents they introduce supplements such as L-theanine is a really good supplement for ADHD. But again, please, as I said, go and do your own research. I am not an expert in dietary or nutrition in any way, shape, or form. So I want to make sure I put that out there. So supplements I know can really help people. I know people have used creatine. I know people have also used creatine, L-theanine. There's another one. L-tyrosine. Some people have used green tea. So in particular, some of the foods that I use are known to really help people with neurodiversity. I don't remember
mhm,
all of them, but those are some of the ones that I've used personally. I don't use supplements anymore because I'm learning to manage it without it. But when I do see the need to go back onto it, I would go onto it for sure. So I know people incorporate different strategies because strategies people think it's just about management there and then, but you can look at the whole wider picture. You can look at their
mhm.
use of social media. You can look at their use of technology. All these different elements really can actually have a part to play.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Um, so the next set of questions is about school, sports, and everyday life. Um, First question that we have under that category is how can I support my child at school in sports or in social settings? I know you already spoke about social settings. So for this particular question, it would be how can I support my child at school and in sports?
How can I support my child in school and in sports? I think I would need it to be a bit more specific, but I'm going to
Mm,
assume maybe they're having difficulties in school in regards to
mm,
their class. I'm gonna assume maybe. I think one of the most important things is to have a very open and upfront conversation with the students, with the teacher and the whole body of teachers in that school, so they can understand how best to cater to their child, and also ask them in themselves what they experience when it comes to their child, because quite often who your child is in school versus they are when they're at home are two completely different people sometimes, depending
mm,
on a child. And we see this a lot. We used to see this a lot at work. One parent would say their child's this way at home, but then when the child would go to school, the school would say that they are completely different. So I'd say seeking to understand how they are in school, having a an open conversation with the teachers is also another really good what's I think I have less of opinion on how to support a child in sports because I think quite often a sporting environment is inherently quite supportive from what I've noticed and from my
Mm,
experience. I know for some children it may not be, but also giving them the chance when a child comes back from home to tell you what their experience has been like, what they've liked about it, what they've really
mm,
not enjoyed about it, asking them, understanding from them. Because what I'm essentially saying is, I believe a child has the tools to support themselves. I don't always
mm,
believe as a parent we always have to be so overly involved in everything that they do because I think that we don't give children enough credit in many ways, shape, or form, that they'll be able to navigate their own experiences and to be able to find their own levels of support. But I do think if you want to support them, focusing on those positive parts of the sport that they really enjoy, if they're
mhm,
having a struggle, if they're having a wobble, so to speak, which
mm,
is incredibly normal. So that affirming approach, that listening, that understanding is going to be so important. And I think one of the best ways you can support your child in school and sports is showing up at their events, showing up at their parents'
mm,
evenings, showing up at their I don't know, their show or showing up at their game, being their greatest cheerleader and their greatest fan. I think parents really underestimate the impact it has for a child to look to the corner on of a football match. I'm just using that as an example because I play football. And to see their parent there cheering them on. They may not say it there and then in that moment, but they will always remember those moments in time. Those are moments that a child will never forget that my mum or my dad were there. They were there at the game. They supported me. When I lost, they were there. When I won, they were there. They were there for every game, whatever it could be. Sometimes
mm,
that's the greatest way to support, to show up and just to be there. Sometimes I
mm,
think people are looking for this answer that's almost like a silver bullet to cut across all problems, but sometimes the problems themselves are resolved as time naturally goes on.
mm. And the question we have is, how can I support my child in managing sensory sensitivities, anxiety, or meltdowns?
How can I help my child with sensitivities and meltdowns? Is
So
that the
how can I
question? Just
support
like,
my child? Yeah. How can I support my child with managing their sensory differences, anxiety, but you've already touched on that earlier, and meltdowns. But sometimes I don't really like the word meltdowns. Maybe I'll use dysregulation. So when their child is
yes.
struggling with sensory sensitivity and they're becoming dysregulated, what advice would you give parents?
Yeah, I would say it's a great distinction you've just made there, Savannah. Dysregulation is a more affirmative way to speak about what's going on. It's that sensory overload, that sensory sensitivity. One of the best ways you can support the child is to contain them in the sense of to let them know that you're here, you're there, you're not going anywhere. They take their time as much as they need. And I've watched this happen that again, a child will regulate themselves naturally. As time goes on, they will learn to understand what's going on and they can advocate for themselves. I think quite often with parents, what we have seen is parents are so quick to try and suppress them, suppress them, suppress them. And that's not what I mean by containing. What I mean by containing them is letting them, I'm here, I'm right here. Take the time that you need. Don't suppress yourself and try and change yourself for whatever's going on. Do what you need to do essentially right now in this moment. And that what I mean is some kids just get up and run around and scream and laugh and joke, whatever it could be. Let your child have the freedom to do that and contain them safely within that space. Let them know that this is a place over which they can do that. But using that neuroaffirmative language is also going to be super important to call it what it is, which is a dysregulation. It's not a meltdown, because I think a meltdown is almost a pejorative in some ways. It's almost people like, when people have said typically, oh, they're having a meltdown or they're having a breakdown, it seems as if in some ways it's almost accusatory. It can seem as if they just can't handle what's going on and it's their fault when it's not necessarily their fault. They may not be able to handle what's going on there and then in that moment, but it's not their fault. It's the way their brain has been wired. And they are at no greater fault than that than anybody else who struggles with any sort of neurodiversity or mental health illness, whatever it could be. So using that neuroaffirmative language and containing them is going to be incredibly important when it comes to managing that dysregulation for sure.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Um, Now we have more of a specific question here. And this is from another parent. I have a 10-year-old who is not diagnosed, but I believe he has autism. He struggles with focus, reading social cues, and confidence. What steps should I take to support him? And I know you've mentioned a lot of, you've mentioned a lot of nuggets of advice over this call. But with this specific situation that they don't actually have an official diagnosis, um, but she believes he does, what would you suggest?
So let me just make sure I've got that right. For this parent, they believe their child may have autism because they struggle with
Mm,
social cues and
hmm
focus. And what can
hmm
they do to support? So I think the first thing is do the watchful waiting approach. Not all kids with struggle with social cues or focus are autistic.
hmm
And some kids just generally might be on technology too much. With the rise of addictive technology, it's actually stolen children's focus. It's actually rewiring the way children's brains are actually interacting with the world. And what I mean by that is, if you think about what social media does, social media is built to be addictive. It's built to like a
mm,
casino slot to scroll up and down. And when children are from as young as 5 or even younger now are on technology from really young, we're not giving them a time or the chance to train their focus. So the watchful waiting approach is quite simply you take time, you take notes, you seek to understand what's going on. And for example, if it's social cues, your child might just be shy. They might just be anxious. It might not even be autism again. They could be having a very normal human child experience. And I think we also have to be really careful about pathologizing children's behavior. I think in the world in which we live now, we're always trying to find an answer to explain something. And sometimes some things never have answers, and some things do have more clear-cut answers. So for some children and parents, I've always asked the parent, what would a diagnosis do for you and for your child? Would it help you to navigate and to explain the world? Would it help you for him to have a place in the world, for you to have a place? What is it you want the diagnosis for? Seeking to realize what you need it for is also going to be so important because you have your own motivations naturally as a parent, whether it's to support them
mm,
or whether it's to go, oh, this makes sense now, why this is like this or this is like that. That's something else. So that watchful waiting approach, understanding why you are seeking the diagnosis, what a diagnosis would also do for you. But also, I would say another good way to really support the child is just by simply asking them, "Oh,
mm,
did you like if let's say I'm going to use an example. If a parent says, my child doesn't understand social cues. So let's say I assume maybe a child may not be able to understand when another child's upset. Maybe asking them, oh, did you notice that time with that child? Like, did you see that were they upset or were they happy? So being
mm,
inquisitive with your own child would help them to help you to also realize if it's something they generally do not see at all, or if they're just being a child, where it's a bit of what we call object permanence, which is almost the idea of out of sight, out of mind. They're so focused in their own internal world, they're not seeing anything. So this is why the watchful waiting approach is very important. Another thing you could maybe do as a parent. But this is a bit more leading. So a child could naturally just go, yeah, that's me. You could show them examples of other kids that perhaps are autistic or maybe have ADHD or whatever neurodiversity that you think it could be, and ask them, what do you think about this? And children sometimes naturally will go, I feel like I do that sometimes. So naturally, sometimes they'll come out with their own answers as well. So it's again letting them be in many ways the expert of their experience and allowing you to navigate them. So it's almost
hmm
being child-led in some ways, but watchful waiting is really, really important because sometimes we're way too quick to jump the gun to go straight for a diagnosis. And we've seen it happen. Sometimes children just simply don't have autism or ADHD. They might just be a late developer. They might just be a late bloomer. It could be a myriad of other different reasons.
hmm Perfect. Thank you so much. That is the end of all the questions that we have from our parents. I just want to thank you for, you know, offering your expertise in the field and offering some guidance to our parents. Really appreciate it. I can see that um we got about a couple minutes left, but if you could give one last advice to parents, what would it be?
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. My last advice to parents would be do not allow children or you as a parent to believe that neurodiversity is the entirety of your child's life. It is a chapter in their book and not the entire book. And what I mean by that is quite often when people are diagnosed with things, it becomes their central part of their identity, as if there's not many other facets that make up an individual for who they are. So allow a child to have an identity outside of their neurodiversity if they are diagnosed. Also, to understand that their neurodiversity is not a limit, it can actually be a massive asset and a massive help. Some of the brightest minds in the world have been incredibly neurodiverse, and it's allowed them to really push and to create great things. If you look at Richard Branson, for example, who was dyslexic and he's created Virgin, there's so many different people in the world who have had neurodiversities and have been able to succeed. You have Trevor Noah, who was diagnosed with ADHD, and he obviously used to run the Late Show. Sorry, I think it was a Trevor Noah show. All these individuals are successful because of their neurodiversity, not without it. So allowing kids to understand that they can be successful just because the world is not set up for them in particular kind of ways, to realize that they can build their own internal world to thrive and to succeed. So allowing it not to be an excuse, but also allowing it to know, like giving them the reality that the world is not typically neuroaffirmative, but you will be neuroaffirmative at home. So giving them the understanding that this is not a limit, this is only the beginning, is going to be super, super important. But also, as I said, do not allow the neurodiversity to become a self-limited belief. Allow it to be a propulsion for them to move forward, to be better at what they do, and also for you to be an even more incredible parent than what you are now.